Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com.
Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. If you're tuning into this podcast, you're here to listen to our discussion of some of the biggest stories that have occurred both in the real estate world as well as the economic world that pertain to the Miami and the South Florida real estate market. Let me just sort of lay out the rules of engagement. I've handpicked 6 articles. I've then sent them off to our current and former journalists. I've asked them to review them, and then I'm going to ask them to go ahead and give us some context. Then the goal of the podcast is to cut through all of the hyperbole and the embellishment that's out there and they give you, the audience, an idea of what's really going on and what to watch out for. So let me go ahead and introduce our roundtable members. We're going to start off with John Fakler. John was a journalist for over 20 years. Right now, he does public relations and consulting. And if anybody wants to get a hold of him, they can send him a message at fakler@consultant.com. That's singular, fakler@consultant.com. Mr. Fakler, how's it going today?
How you doing, Peter? Good to be back.
Great to have you back. And looking real spiffy today, Mr. Fakler.
Got a haircut.
It's a nice job. Let me remind the audience, if you're listening to this podcast on a traditional platform such as Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor, you now have the capability to actually watch the podcast. Simply go to any platform that provides for video. And also, too, this podcast is going to be up on YouTube, where our handle is Condo Vultures TV, Condo Vultures TV. So let me move on to our second panelist. That's going to be a gentleman who's been a journalist for 25 years, including 20 years in the state of Florida. He wrote about finance, real estate, and a variety of other business topics. That's John Gruss. John currently has a public relations and marketing firm called Gruss Communications. If you want to reach out to him, go to grusspr.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. What's going on, John?
Hey, Peter. Glad to be back on your unauthorized real estate podcast.
And it is an unauthorized podcast. So, gentlemen, feel free to use salty language. The audience has already been alerted to that. And now for our third panelist. This is a gentleman who has been a journalist for over 30 years. He writes about a whole variety of different topics. He's just actually landed into Washington, D.C., where he's been based. He was down in South America, nosing around for what story? I don't know. He's probably not going to share with us, but we might try to get it out of him. His name is Ken Silverstein. If anybody wants to reach out to Ken, you can get him at ken.silverstein@gmail.com. What's going on, Mr. Silverstein? And do you have jet lag?
I don't have jet lag because I was in the same time zone, but I'm exhausted because I was working long hours and also having a good time in Bogota. And I came back, crashed for about 36 hours, and then I had to go straight back to work. So I'm fried. So you owe me for being on the show today.
And we love having you on the show. We'll make sure it's nice and simple and easy as going to the dentist. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get into our first 3 stories.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to CondoVultures.com for more information. CondoVultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. This segment, we're going to deal with our first 3 stories that I handpicked. I sent them to the journalists. I asked them to review them, and now I'm going to read the headline, first couple of graphs, and then I'm going to ask for a straightforward, point-blank assessment of the story and kind of what they anticipate is sort of going on in the background. Now, I should mention, Ken Silverstein is based up in Washington, D.C. However, he spent a lot of time in Miami. He's actually lived in Miami, and he will be returning to Miami sometime soon. So he's giving us that out-of-town perspective as to what maybe some of these stories mean. So for our first story, we're going to start off with John Fakler. John, this piece is actually coming out of USA Today. I will read the headline to you. I will then read the first couple graphs, and then let me give you a perspective on it. And let me remind the panelists or the other people on the roundtable, if you want to go ahead and chime in, feel free to do so. So, John, as somebody who moved here from New York, this story really popped in terms of who I should assign it to. So, headline, again, USA Today. New Yorkers are the number one movers to Florida. New Yorkers are number one movers to Florida. Now, let me read you the first couple graphs, and I'm going to ask you to comment. Watch out, New Yorkers. Florida's coming for you. A large kiosk in the mall in Hudson Yards of Manhattan beckons you to experience Tampa Bay. New York City subway ads showcase the pristine beaches of St. Petersburg, and billboards in Times Square tout the hashtag move to Miami. But looking at migration numbers, one wonders if Florida needs to even bother advertising, since at least 2016, the Empire State has topped the list for sending its residents to the Sunshine State. Data from the Census Bureau shows during the coronavirus pandemic, many New Yorkers who could work remotely and were looking for warmer climes and more affordable housing options left the city in droves and headed to Florida. Mr. Fakler, you moved here in 1980. New Yorkers have been moving to Florida forever and ever and ever. Is this any kind of new trend, or is this simply the typical cyclical play where when the economy starts to change and there's an opportunity to search for riches in Florida, people come down here, but then once reality sort of hits, then they pack their shit and they move back to the state of New York? What do you make of this? Is this a trend that will continue, or is it typically another fad?
I was actually shocked by these numbers, particularly they're saying the last 2 years, the increase is continuing. They're a lot younger, not quite Gen Zers, but they're millennials. The reasons why are different. For instance, this has always been considered New York South here in Miami, but what's happening is it's not just because of the beautiful weather and the no taxes, which are the typical reasons. What's happening now is Florida opened up before New York. Remember, New York was shut down during COVID for 9 months longer than Florida was. Why? DeSantis, he's an anti-vaxxer.
Florida,
say what you want about him.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis.
Florida Governor DeSantis. Yeah, and he opened up business sooner. So what happened was businesses are looking at this from New York and saying, what the hell, let's go down there, lower taxes, yada, yada. But also the residents of New York figure, okay, I'm going to need to find a job. So if he's opening up businesses, restaurants, etc., earlier than us, I'm going to get the hell out of here. And so I think that had a big impetus for this migration pattern. The reasons, some of the old reasons why people came down here are still valid and still there. But I think what happened was, this is why they came. What's interesting is there's kind of a war going on between New York, the liberals, government officials, and Florida right now, because they see this exodus, the New York liberals. By the way, I'm a diehard liberal, so I'm looking at it from that position. But what's happening is they're actually putting up advertisements, billboards, trying to get people not to move to Florida. Why? Because, there's all this legislation being proposed. Don't say gay, anti-abortion legislation, all this stuff going on. And so the liberal Democrats are trying to appeal to the liberal New Yorkers, like, hey, you don't want to go to Florida. What do you want to go there? You're going to be dealing with all this other stuff. So, it's kind of ironic because the numbers show the exodus continues. So I guess people don't give a rat's ass. They're just coming down and they're setting up shop down here. They figure it's more pro-business than New York. And I really doubt they're going to be going back.
Mr. Fakler, just follow-up question. Yes or no will suffice. Will these New Yorkers who moved down here during the pandemic, will they stay more than 3 years? Or are they likely to pack their stuff and head back home?
I'm going to tell you just from my own experience. Sometimes when you first come down, it's a little intimidating. You don't know anybody. For people to go back, it's usually within the first year. But once you're here a couple of years, you're less likely to go back. So I really believe they're really relocating down here permanently. And, that's just my
fantastic.
opinion.
So for story number 2, we're going to go to Ken Silverstein. Ken, this is a story I think that's right up your alley. Again, you're based in DC, but you lived in Miami. But more importantly, you've seen alleged corruption all around the country, if not the world. So this story sort of jumped out, and I wanted third-party eyes to give us some perspective. So Piece is coming out of the Miami Herald. Let me read the headline for a couple graphs, then I'm going to ask you to comment. Records show another big sum in code fines was reduced for husband of Miami city attorney. And here's the first couple graphs. Really a fascinating story here. It says the husband of Miami city attorney had a code enforcement lien reduced by about $117,000 in April of 2019. The second time in 8 months that a city board dramatically reduced the hefty fine for a property owner, for a property that he owned. The husband of the city attorney. Property records show Carlos Morales, owner of Express Homes Incorporated and husband of Miami City Attorney Victoria Mendez, has for years flipped Miami-Dade County homes, including some in the city where his wife is the top legal officer. His business activity was thrust into the spotlight after Morales and Menendez were sued in Miami-Dade Circuit Court last week over allegations that they conspired to enrich themselves by buying a little Havana home at below market value, in quotes, having $271,250 in code enforcement fines wiped out in July of 2018 and selling the property for a profit. So Ken, let me lay it out for you. Typically, if you are a distressed buyer and you're looking for properties, one of the best places to go to is a property where there are all kinds of fines for all kinds of reasons. Maybe the property is unsafe. There could be, illegal work done. And typically, as these fines build, they build and they build and they build, and the owner isn't able to pay off the fines, and therefore they're faced with foreclosure. So somebody will step forward, they'll buy them, and they'll have to assume the fines that have been tallied. And many times, these individuals will then go to the city and they'll appeal for some sort of reduction in order to take over the property, deal with the fines, and let the property go forward rather than being caught up in legal fees. So that's what we're looking at here. The question to you, Ken, is, does it strike you as being unique or atypical for the city attorney for the city of Miami to also be married to somebody who's going around buying homes that are in trouble with big fines? And she, in theory, might have some sort of stay on whether or not these fines are levied or whether or not they're reduced. And in this case, we're talking about reductions in the six-figure range. So what say you, Ken? Is there something here?
Look, I want to be careful and measured and not, I've just read the story. You sent it to me earlier the day. So I don't want to reach any hasty conclusions, but it's clearly corrupt as fuck. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. I mean, you can't allow that. It's an obvious conflict of interest. It's an obvious problem. And I mean, I read this story and I thought, the first thing after seeing the headline and reading the first graph was, how did this story come out? And then I discover, as you were reading this, it was a lawsuit where this information was revealed. But probably this is the sort of stuff that, especially in a place like Miami, that is just clearly one of the more corrupt places in the country. It looks bad, it smells bad, it's just bad, and it's probably also utterly routine. The reason I was looking at how it came out was that this probably happens, 1,000 times a day, these sorts of little dirty, corrupt deals. And we just don't hear about them. But.
Well, and that's a great point, Ken. And let me just remind the audience, the reason why these fines are so important is that if you were a bidder and you're going after a property and you come up with a price of what you're going to pay, plus you have to add the fine on top of it, that's a deal killer. So if you have an ability to eliminate that fine, now suddenly you have the ability to go in there, purchase a property and actually make some money off of it, which this gentleman was apparently doing. Now let me just read a quote from the home flipper, the fix and flippers attorney. And the attorney's name is Matthew Ladd. He represents Morales, which is the husband of the city attorney, and his company, which is called Express Homes. Let me just read this. It says, and according to Miami Herald, Carlos Morales, his related company, Express Homes, and the city of Miami attorney are completely innocent. They are the victims of an unethical ploy to leverage personal litigation against the city's employees and their families in an effort to resolve the stalled federal suit. So that's the end of that story. Story number 3, we're going to go to Jean. Jean, this is a story that pertains to the Florida legislative session, which is beginning right now. And again, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who is deemed to be a possible candidate for the U.S. president. So that's a little bit of background. John, I'm going to read this story. It's coming out of The Real Deal. Headline, breaking down Florida's proposed affordable housing legislation. Subhead, housing bill aims to fund gaps that developers statewide face. In the state of Florida, we don't have income tax. As a result, the state and the local municipalities, they fill their coffers pretty much with fees, impact fees, taxes on transactions, things like that, because there's no state income tax. So keep that in mind. So, John, here we go. Florida's proposed affordable housing legislation aimed at incentivizing developers with major tax breaks and hundreds of $millions in funding is advancing in the state legislature. Senate Bill 102, known as the Live Local Act and related legislation, would be a boon for developers of attainable and workforce housing. Real estate attorneys and developers say the bill was approved by the Community Affairs and Appropriations Committee in February and heads to the Senate floor next. If it becomes law, it'll take effect July 1st. Florida Senator Alexis Colatuda, a Republican who represents part of Miami-Dade County, introduced the legislation in January. It aims to create more affordable rental housing via tax breaks, expedited permitting, funding, and zoning incentives. It would also restore funds to Zalewski's trust fund, which was gutted by Florida lawmakers for years. Opponents are critical of some aspects of the legislation, including the state eliminating the ability of local governments to enact rent control. That is currently only allowed if local governments declare a housing emergency. So Jean, we got a push-pull here going. The Florida legislature and the bill is saying, let's go ahead and incentivize developers to build more housing. And what that will do is that will deal with this lack of affordable housing that exists. In return for developers playing this game, local municipalities will not be able to put in place rent control, which, by the way, could be an issue given the fact all the New Yorkers where rent control is prevalent, suddenly could come into the mix. So, John, what do you make of this? Is this a fair trade for developers and, more importantly, for the residents who are up to their eyeballs in rent increases?
You know, it's funny. When I read this story, it was like deja vu. Like this happened back in 2005. You may remember before the bust, we had an incredible boom, and housing affordability was a huge issue back then. And all these government programs were set in place, and they didn't do a darn thing. I mean, really, the only thing that created affordable housing was the Great Recession, when prices basically collapsed. So I don't put a lot of faith in any government programs to make a meaningful dent. I mean, it might help here and there, but it doesn't look, in my opinion, I don't think it's going to make a meaningful dent. But what is very interesting in this story is that it looks like the state is trying to wrest control from municipalities to enact rent control. And also in the story, it talks about the ability of the state to take control of, to essentially negate the ability of municipalities to enact their zoning laws, enforce their zoning laws on developers who want to build in industrial and commercial areas. And I think that's pretty interesting because municipalities have traditionally been the ones to decide where you can build or not build. And that's because it's a very local decision. It looks like the state is taking that away from municipalities. And, whether that's good or not is open for debates, but it's sort of the MO of the current party in power at the state level to take away basically a lot of the local ability to self-govern. So I don't know. There's just a lot in there that's a little bit suspect, and there's different motives, and I'm not quite sure it really is going to help affordable housing that much. That's just my opinion.
The president of the United States, Joe Biden, has really moved towards, and the state of California has embraced a movement towards dealing with affordable housing by simply changing zoning, by taking away that security that a single family home community can have multifamily. One of the ways to deal with actually adding more housing is simply change the zoning. And now if it's all single family homes, why not allow them to be duplexes? Now there's been a lot of pushback saying that you're going to take away the value of our homes for those people who live there. But then the flip side is by doing so, you're not going to need to put in place new infrastructure in a place like South Florida where the Everglades is to our west. And it would entail going in and reclaiming more Everglades and laying down sewers and roads and things like that. I just wonder, and this is a rhetorical question, I wonder if this isn't part of the national aspirations of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, who some will say will try to run for president in 2024, with his take away the municipalities' control and rent control, and more so of a movement, let the market sort of decide how it's going to go. So with that, we're going to go ahead. We'll take it for us. Break. Other side of break, we're going to get our next three stories. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with CVRrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome back to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. We're going to talk about our next three stories in this Reporters Roundtable. And again, what it is I handpick some stories, I send them off to the journalists, I ask them to read them, and then I want to discuss them. So what I will do is I will read the headline, I will read the first couple graphs, then we're going to have a discussion, straight talk discussion about what the journalist actually thinks, what's real, what's hyperbole, and what's the takeaway for you, the audience, as you're out there, whether you're an investor, you're someone who's in the business, or you're simply watching from afar. So we're going to go to Ken Silverstein for story number 4. Ken, this is coming out of CNBC. Let me read you the headline. Homes might be more affordable in 2024, but that doesn't mean you should wait to buy one. So that's the headline. Let me read the first couple graphs. With U.S. home prices dropping and mortgage rates projected to dip sometime in 2024, home buyers might be wondering if they should wait until next year to land a more affordable deal. But with economic outlook particularly murky right now, buyers shouldn't be overly concerned with timing their purchase, real estate experts tell CNBC. The average interest rate for a benchmark 30-year fixed mortgage rate reached 7.08 as of Monday. However, with the economy expected to cool and possibly dip into a recession, many recent forecasts expect rates to drop to 6% or below in 2024, including a Fannie Mae projection of 5.2%. So a drop of 1% in mortgage rates works out to about $200 a month in mortgage costs for a 30-year fixed rate on a $300,000 home loan. Meanwhile, home prices continue to weaken and are already down 2.7% from their June peak. According to S&P Schiller Home Price Index, forecasts are a mixed bag, but most experts predict prices to either remain flat or continue cooling by 1 to 10% from their 2022 highs. So Ken, the question for you is, if somebody needs a place to live and they're paying high price for their rent, does it make sense to go in now and sort of deal with the possibility that you're catching a falling knife, but you're saving on the rental? Or should these people simply bite the bullet, pay the high rent, and hope that they can get back in 2024 and get a much better price and a much lower mortgage rate? What say you?
Well, first off, I'm not an expert when it comes to the housing market. Secondly, you're asking me for financial advice. And all of you may have heard me say this, Peter, I'd be shocked if you haven't heard me say this. I am living proof that Jews do not have the Midas touch with money. So whatever I suggest, do the opposite. I mean, I would be very skeptical about buying at the moment. First off, nobody knows. I mean, it's all guesswork. But I always assume that most media coverage is driven by the industry, the real estate industry. It's, I mean, they always tell you, prices, the prices never drop, you can never go wrong by buying. I don't know. That's just not true. And I don't trust people close to the industry. But secondly, I mean, even if you look at what the article is saying, don't really pay attention. I mean, prices may be dropping and rates may be coming down, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't buy. But if you just look at the numbers they throw out, I mean, what was it? $200 a month on a $300,000 loan, was it, Peter?
Yes.
Yeah, 200. Yeah, a drop of 1% in mortgage rates works out to about $200 in mortgage costs for a 30-year fixed rate on a $300,000 home loan. I mean, okay, it's not a pile of money, but it's a couple of $100 a month.
Real money.
It's decent. It's a chunk of change. And then they say prices may drop by up to 10%. I mean, hey, if it's a $500,000 property, and that's not a lot for a property in Miami, most urban areas, that's 50 grand. I don't know. I mean, I'd sort of sit tight. I mean, I would sit tight. But again, like that probably means everyone should buy a house tomorrow. Because so I would, but I don't know. It's like, oh yeah, things are a little murky. Well, murky's not good. I mean, and these are all, of course, they're just guessing here. Prices could drop from 1 to 10%. Well, what if they drop by 20? I mean, we don't know. Rates are very high. The economy is going to go into recession. I don't know. I just generally don't take seriously the press reports about the housing market, because I tend to think they're painting a picture that's not great and saying, oh, but don't let that bother you. But I don't know. I don't think that's the worst case scenario.
What could go wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly. A lot could go wrong. You could buy a dog in the house. It could have, need a lot of repairs. The heating could go out, whatever. And then you've got the risk of I mean, it is, you don't want to overpay. And they're even, what they're suggesting is, okay, 2,400, let's double the 300,000. So then you're talking $400 a month. That's $5,000 a year right there. And 10% on a $600,000 property is $60,000. I don't know, that adds up. So I'd wait. But hey, here I am at my advanced age and I don't have a house. So what do I know?
Could I just add something here? For those agents, local agents and brokers who are looking for a discerning buyer, you can contact Ken directly at his email address.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that.
Fantastic. All right, story number 2. John Fakler, we're going to go to you. Story number 2 is coming out of the Commercial Observer. It is a real estate online website. And I will tell you, the headline can be about Jeffrey Soffer. Anybody doesn't know the Soffer name? It's attached to a lot of development in the Miami and South Florida area, including the Aventura Mall, as well as the Fontainebleau Hotel over in Miami Beach. The Soffer family was also instrumental in building up what would become the city of Aventura. So that's what Soffer is. Let me go ahead and read this story. I'm going to read the headline. I'm going to read the first couple graphs, Mr. Fakler, and I'll ask you to comment. Jeffrey Soffer buys building that houses his story nightclub. And here we go. First couple graphs. Jeffrey Soffer purchased a building that houses his story nightclub as the future of the venue stands in limbo. The developer who heads Fontainebleau Development paid $23 million to purchase a 2-story building at 136 Collins Avenue, Miami Beach's South of 5th neighborhood. Property records show the sellers, the Kane family, developed the 15,600 square foot property, 1994. Story, which Soffer owns with nightclub mogul David Grootman, opened in 2012 and has become one of Miami's most popular clubs, where groups such as Swedish House Mafia, DJ Tiesto, and Diplo have played. Soffer and Grootman financed the purchase with a $15.2 million mortgage from London-based Modcombe Estates. They also co-own the Live nightclub, which is in the ground floor of the Fontainebleau Hotel, located up in Middle Beach, which Soffer also owns. And then last graph, the story building sale comes just days after the club's operators sued the city of Miami Beach over an alcohol ban. Last week, commissioners voted to halt liquor sales after 2 a.m. for establishment in the South of 5th neighborhood, but made an exception for venues that can accommodate up to 100 patrons. Previously, alcohol could be sold until 5 a.m. Now, Mr. Fakler, before I ask you to comment, we are at the beginning of the spring break season in South Florida. Photos and videos and social media went viral last year when the rest of the United States was on lockdown, but the state of Florida was open. Therefore, a lot of spring breakers came to Miami, came to Miami Beach, ran amok, overwhelmed streets, were twerking on top of police cars, just basically having a great time. And as a result, the residents of the city of Miami Beach pushed for controlling the sale of liquor past 2 a.m. So all of this sort of factors in together. So my question to you, Mr. Fakler, is Soffer's commitment to this particular property, given the fact that he owns Live as well as Story, he now owns this property in the South of Fifth area. Is this a harbinger to say that this reduction in time for liquor sales in Miami Beach of 2 a.m., which is new, is it likely that there's going to be a real push to try to repeal that and return to the days of all hell breaking loose in Miami Beach? What say you, Mr.
Yeah,
Fakler?
I would assume so, and I'll tell you why. The timing of this is really interesting and suspect. The 2 a.m. curfew for liquor sales was supposed to start Sunday, but there's been an injunction because Soffer's fighting this in court, well, with the legislation, and now they've given him sort of until next Wednesday, I believe, to rule on this. So what I don't understand is anybody who, a lot of people don't know the clubs, but this is a very late night or after hours type clubs. All the celebrities come here. People don't start drinking till midnight. They don't start going out till midnight. So if they have a liquor, they implement this ban on liquor sales at 2 o'clock, they're not going to make any money. So far, none of these clubs are going to make any money. That's where they get their bread and butter, comes from liquor sales. I know I used to be in the bar business. So I'm very suspect as to why he purchased this with a mortgage, by the way, $15 million mortgage. Why now? Does he know something? Is something he doesn't know? And that goes to your question about, does he know maybe it's going to be repealed completely? And, what's his motivation for making this purchase? I'm a little confused. Maybe you can chime in, Peter, on maybe why that is, or if that's even an issue that you think. I mean, he's not buying it for the dirt, is he? I mean, maybe he is. Maybe he's buying it. It's a 2-story building. Is he going to tear it down and just, use it, have the dirt to sell? I mean, I don't know.
Well, I don't know if I can answer the question, but let me kind of lay it out there. So generally speaking, South Beach, from my definition, and anyone who doesn't know South Beach, it's a neighborhood in the Barrier Island city of Miami Beach. So the city of Miami Beach is different than the city of Miami, which is across the causeway, which is 4 to 5 miles to the west. So generally speaking, when you get into the city of Miami Beach, there's a neighborhood called South Beach, or there's an area called South Beach. And then within South Beach, there's an area called South of Fifth. Now, the way it's been, and this property is in the South of Fifth neighborhood. Now, the way it's been explained is the circus in South Beach, where everybody is twerking on the cop cars and they're overwhelming Ocean Drive and doing a variety of different things. All of that occurs between 5th Street. And as you go north, the street numbers go up. You start at 0, which is effectively a street called South Point Drive. But as you go north of 5th, that's effectively the circus. That's where the pretty people hang out. That's where the DJs are. That's where the strippers are. That's where the escorts. That's where all the guys selling, you name it, are. Now, typically south of 5th is where the wealthy older people live, and they want to have proximity to the circus, but they don't want to live in the circus, if that sort of makes sense. So it's always sort of been explained that way. Now what I'm wondering is, by going in and purchasing the Story Nightclub, maybe there's a play where A, it gets repealed and you can return to selling liquor sales till 5 a.m.
Yep.
And B, if it doesn't, maybe you have a hardship argument you can make to the city to try to get the property up zone. So instead of having 2-story club on it, lo and behold, Jeffrey Soffer, who builds condominium towers in Aventura and builds hotels, and now has the capability to sue, saying you restricted my ability to make money. And I'm not an attorney, you got to check my attorney. But now maybe there's a way to sort of, it doesn't matter what happens, he's not going to necessarily lose. Now, I will say, before I go to the next story, John, you wake up early and you go running at 6 a.m. So I'm not going to ask you this question, but I will ask Ken Silverstein, who's going to be coming to Miami relatively soon. Mr. Silverstein, you spent some time living in Miami, in Miami Beach, places like that. Would a 2 a.m. liquor license law, would that impact your willingness or desire to come to Miami Beach, when given the fact most of the time liquor licenses allowed places to be open till 5 a.m. And some of the places that were kind of off the grid were open much longer than that. So what is 2 a.m. liquor license? Last call. What would that mean for you as a visitor who's been in Miami regularly but doesn't liquor full time?
Well, I mean, one of the things that's fun about Miami is that, you don't, I never think about that. You can always find a drink in Miami. So, I mean, I'm old and boring now, but, periodically I still do like to go out.
Sure.
And, hang out all night. So, I would not be in favor of that because it, like I said, it's one of the nice things about Miami. It doesn't matter. You roll out of one place at 1 or 2 and there's plenty of other options. So, it's probably a bigger deal, certainly a bigger deal for, people a lot younger than me, but even I like to, periodically tie one on and have a good time and stay out all night. So
Can I add something to
from a selfish point of view, I'd say no. I think it's a bad idea.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes.
Back in the day when I went clubbing, okay, we used to go to a place called Space. I used to have the glow sticks. We doing our dancing, but that was more lowbrow. That was we're talking highbrow as far as Live and these other places that are on it's out of South of Fifth. So I have no idea what that's like. I just know what it was like in downtown Miami.
Well, that's true for me too. I mean, I very rarely go to a club. So, but nonetheless, I'm just like, I think people, in Miami, one should be allowed to have as much fun as possible.
I still have my glow sticks too, Ken, if you want them next when you come down here.
All right. I may borrow them.
Yeah. All right, John, we're going to go to you with story number 6. It's coming out of the Wall Street Journal. And John, by the way, before I read the headline in the first couple graphs, when you're out exercising and living a healthy life, do you ever see a lot like Ken or Mr. Fakler wander around with glow sticks?
Yes, I do actually, and they're coming back from the clubs in my building just as I'm going out for a run, and
Nice.
they're looking pretty sad.
So John, I'm going to read you the headline, the first couple graphs from the story out of the Wall Street Journal. How to fill an office today. Waive the rent. That's the headline. Subhead. Landlords and major office hubs are handing out incentives such as longer rent-free periods to encourage companies to sign leases. John, first couple of graphs. Rent an apartment and you can only dream of getting up to a fifth of your tenancy rent-free. This is what it'll take now to fill some offices. Headline rents for good quality offices were surprisingly stable during the pandemic. In London, rents for the best centrally located properties are 1.3% ahead of 2019 levels, according to commercial real estate consulting firm Carter Jonas. In New York, rents are up 5.7%. Data from property analytics company Comstack shows, but demand isn't as good as the headline suggests. Landlords need to offer sweetener to get companies to move in. In the United States last year, tenant improvement allowances, money that owners give to new tenants to pay towards fitting out an office, were 23% higher than in 2019, according to CBRE. And owners are waiving the rent for a portion of the tenancy. Although they offer this perk in good times too, rent-free periods are getting longer. John, is anyone going to go back to an office, and how badly do office landlords need to offer these incentives to get butts in the seats, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, there've been in the last several months several institutional investment funds that have limited redemptions and have defaulted on some of their mortgages on buildings, office buildings in places like LA and New York and Chicago. So I think I think that's happening nationally. When you look at Miami, however, a lot of the Class A, the really nice office buildings are getting filled up. In fact, we've built a few recently. I think the trouble is in the less fancy Class B and Class C space, which has become somewhat obsolete and is not really going to attract a lot of people who have now sort of adopted a more hybrid work from home situation. So I think unless you have like the top quality, super fancy, nice office space, it's going to be really hard to fill office space. And I think already you're seeing some distress in the commercial mortgage-backed securities market. There's been some defaults. Investors are getting skittish. Of course, interest rates rising makes it less profitable. So for all sorts of reasons, the new work from home trend combined with rising interest rates and just too much of this obsolete space. I mean, we've got plenty of it in Miami. I think it's a tale of two cities, basically. You've got the fancy office space that's getting filled up. And you got the, less stellar office space that's remaining empty. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But that's there's definitely a shift in the market.
And I know there's a lot of vulture type investors sitting out there waiting to maybe take down some of this property with the possibility of repositioning it as maybe a different type of use, whether it be hotel, residential,
Apartments.
medical. Yep. Any and all of the above.
Affordable housing. Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Absolutely. Okay, guys, we're going to go ahead. We're going to take a commercial break. On the side of the break, I'm going to ask the panelists to go ahead and give us their words of wisdom going forward. This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I've been in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to Peter@CondoVultures.com. That's Peter@CondoVultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859. Welcome back to the Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. We discussed 6 stories that I handpicked that I thought were going to be important to what's going on in the local South Florida real estate market, as well as the economy. Now I'm going to ask our panelists to go ahead and offer a bit of advice or words of wisdom, generally speaking, as you, the audience, try to work your way through a time when interest rates are still going up, inflation is still solid, the housing market is teetering, but it's not yet broken through, and basically Bitcoin has gone into the shitter. So I'm going to ask all of these panelists to go ahead and give us some words of advice, words of wisdom. We're going to start off with John Gruss. We're then going to go to Ken Silverstein, and then we will end it up for the kicker quote coming from John Fakler. So John, what are your words of wisdom for maybe the audience member as we are here in the beginning of March and we're nearing the end of the winter buying season in South Florida before the hot and humid days of hurricane season come back?
Yeah, I actually think that the winter buying season will turn out to be a bust. And, I saw an interesting statistic just recently that 1/3 of residential mortgages are now held by people with mortgages under 3%.
Wow.
So there's really no incentive for any of these people to sell their home, look for another one that they'd have to pay 7% for. So, I mean, there's a lot of people stuck in their homes, basically. And I think this winter season will be a bit of a bust, I'm afraid.
Wow, interesting. Golden handcuffs. You're stuck to that property. You can't get rid of it. The interest rate's too low and the prices are too high today. Where am I going to go? Type of scenario. So, Ken, let's go to you. You just got back from Bogota. I'm hitting you with all kinds of questions that you don't necessarily give a shit about, but you can definitely provide some context. Give the audience, especially maybe some of those newcomers who've moved to South Florida recently during the pandemic, give them some words of wisdom as we leave the winter buying season and we start to get into the hot and humid days of South Florida.
This is a tough one for me. I'm not a Miami resident, so I'm not really deeply familiar with the rhythm of the city and what the change of the seasons bring. So, I guess my only advice to people in general is if you can leave the United States, do so as soon as possible. It's just, I mean, every time I travel overseas, you know, I'm more and more aware of our faded glory. I mean, I don't know. I am desperate to get out of here. So that's my only advice.
Is that
so much.
because of a strong dollar and how much buying power you have overseas?
It's a lot of things. I mean, a big thing for me is just the cost of medical care in this country is ridiculous. I mean, like, I don't want to go into the details, but I'm just sitting on a pile of medical bills that are it's stupid. It makes no sense. I mean, I truly believe that the best days of the country are behind us. We have hit a tipping point and there is no return. If you're financially comfortable, fine. It's a good place to live, but a whole lot of people aren't. And I'd love to live overseas because I don't know. I like Latin America. People are nicer. The weather's better. The food's better. The culture's better. And yeah, I mean, when I lived in Miami, it's been a few years now, but I remember it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, I was meeting Haitians and Colombians and people from other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean who said, I'm going home. I had it. Again, the healthcare issue is just, it's a criminal racket. I remember talking to a Colombian woman who said, I don't remember exactly what happened, but she had to go to the hospital. She said, there's no way I can ever pay this off. I'm leaving. I'm just I'm done. And, I look at, I think that's, I don't know. It's all anecdotal. I know it's periodically hear from friends or acquaintances. I see stuff on Twitter, read stuff in the paper, but, I don't know. There's a better way to live. So I say, pack up and get the hell out. So that's my only piece of advice.
Interesting. So who knows? If a lot of people adopt Ken's perspective, we might have a glut of housing. That being said, Mr. Fakler, why don't you give us, why don't you round out the words of advice for our audience?
Well, my advice will be a little bit more glass half full than Ken's. But my advice,
the glass is empty.
Yeah. But my advice really is not for the general public. This is more to do with that situation with the liquor license and the clubs down in South Beach. I have a proposal, sort of like a way to mediate this thing. So rather than repeal all the way or stick to their guns, why not redline the area south of 5th? Redline south of 5th. Allow them to stay open till 5 a.m, and then make the rest of Miami Beach 2 a.m, which will make everybody else happy. So of course there'll be fighting in the streets if they accept my proposal, but my proposals are usually off the wall anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, who knows? Maybe somebody will be listening to the podcast and they'll take that into consideration. And I guess my parting words of wisdom is when that insurance bill comes rolling in for that house or that duplex you just bought and you just moved here and you're a little bit surprised by it, you might want to consider how you go forward. And let me sort of lay that out. I had a conversation with a longtime associate, and he was telling me a story about a buddy bought a duplex. So that's 2 apartments in Coconut Grove, which is a neighborhood within the city of Miami. So the guy's insurance on these 2 units that he rents out was $12,000 a year. So he's spending $1,000 a month or $500 per unit per month to insure the place. He just got the increased costs. And we've been talking about this on the podcast because of the collapse of Champlain Tower South, because of the high valuations of homes and how insurance companies have had to adjust because some insurance companies not making money and basically leaving the state. So this gentleman with a duplex with a $12,000 a year insurance cost just gotten cited or just was sent a notice. His insurance has gone to $60,000, 60. So naturally, the gentleman decided he's going to go ahead and try to sell it. All of the offers that came in were locked and loaded. However, once the due diligence was done and the estimates were came in on insurance, all the offers were for half the original price. And the reason that was given is because insurance costs are way too damn high. And as a result, these landlords, these would-be landlords, are not going to be able to make any money on it. So what I will tell you is going forward, the insurance cost is kind of like a sleeping enemy, or it's a poison pill that's waiting out there. So if you own a property, you start to get your insurance costs, keep that in mind. A lot of people are getting them around South Florida as well as the state of Florida and Alton, LA. That will force some people to get out simply because they can't afford it. And that might help go towards helping us to sort of alleviate this shortage in housing. So I want to thank everybody for participating in our podcast today. Let me thank John Gruss. John was a reporter for 25 years, 20 of which were in the state of Florida. Right now, he does public relations and marketing for a company called Gruss Communications. If you want to check out his website, go to grusspr.com, GRUSSPR.com. I want to thank John Fakler. John was a journalist for over 20 years. Right now, he does public relations and consulting. If you want to reach John, send him an email at fakler@consultant.com. That's fakler@consultant.com. And Ken Silverstein's been a journalist for 30 plus years, traveling the world, maybe a glass empty type of guy, but we love that straight talk. And if anybody wants to reach out to Ken, send him an email at ken.silverstein@gmail.com. And I'm Peter Zalewski of Condo Vultures. Thank you for tuning in. Let me remind you, if you have any comments for us, go ahead and send an email to inquiry@condovultures.com, INQUIRY@condovultures.com. And again, if you're listening to this podcast in a traditional audio platform, go ahead and check us out with the video. You'll see some real interesting video shots. This particular podcast, we've had some lighting and some shaking issues, but trust me, it's definitely worth seeing all the ugly mugs behind these comments. So until next time, take care of yourself. We'll catch up soon. Ciao, ciao.
Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.